Welcome back everyone. In this lesson we are going to talk about debugging. So far we've only used the debugging capabilities of our IntelliJ tool, so we only used our IDE, but you should know there is another way of debugging your test, and this is offered directly by Playwright. It's something called the Playwright Inspector. If we go to the documentation, we can see that they have a dedicated page specifically about debugging tests, and here they talk about this Playwright Inspector. This is basically a GUI tool that will pop up when you actually call it, and it will help you to uh, debug your tests, and also it will help you to find out selectors for different elements. Or you can actually use the record function to record a basic test. Now, to set this up, you will need to set up some environment variables. You will need pwdebug, which has three values from what I understand. One, if you set it to 1, it means it will start the inspector when you run your test. If you set it to 0, it won't start the inspector. And if you set it to console, it will do something else that we are going to explore in a different video. You can also set the Playwright Java sources. Well, this is actually an optional environment variable, but it will help you a lot because what it will do, it will actually load the source files and you can see them in your inspector. So this will be very helpful for debugging. So the way we are going to set up these environment variables, it will be directly in IntelliJ. If I go back to our test, so we are going to use the sign in existing user test, and you can see over here that it was already executed in a previous lesson. What we can do, we can edit the configuration, and over here we have something called environment variables. This means that any environment variable we are going to set over here, they will only be used in the context of this test. So let's go ahead and configure this. I'm going to first add pwdebug. I'm going to set this to 1. So this means that when I will start a new test, it will also start the inspector, the Playwright inspector. Then I will add a new variable, which will be the Playwright Java sources. So this is the value of the environment variable. Okay, so now I need to set up the sources. Now, if we read a bit the documentation, they say over here that if I need to add multiple paths, they will need to be separated by colon on macOS or semicolons if you are using Windows. So let's go back to our terminal. Now this is the path to my project right now, and I will need to add 2 paths. One will be for main, one will be for test, and I actually need to go a bit further than that. So for main, it will be actually main Java. So this will be the first path that I'm going to add. Going back to IntelliJ. Okay, this is the first path. Here we are storing our page object. Now the second path will be the test folder, which is under source test Java. Perfect. I'm going to go apply, okay. And now I'm going to run my test. I'm not going to debug it, I'm going to run it directly. What will happen is when the browser starts, we will also see the Playwright inspector. And as you can see over here, I have the browser in my left and the Playwright inspector in my right. So you can see that the test has already stopped at the first action, which is a navigate action to the Best Buy URL. And you can also see that it has loaded my source code, and you can see highlighted over here the line that we are performing right now. So it actually stopped right before performing the navigate action. I have two options right now. I can either go with play, with resume, which will play the rest of my test without any more pauses, or I can step over it, and we are going to do this, and this will bring me to the next action. So it will navigate to the Best Buy URL, and it will bring me to the next action, which will be a click on the account link. So you can see again, it highlights in my code the next action, which is a click on the account button, and it also highlights the element in my page with a red dot, and it also indicates the selector over here. If we go further, you can see over here all the states and all the actions that were performed. So it was waiting for this selector, for the account button. You can see that the selector was resolved to visible. Then again, it was waiting for the element to be visible, enabled, stable, so it needs to pass through all the states that are indicated for auto waiting, and right before it performs the click, it will stop. Now if we go again and do another step over, it will go to the next button, which is the sign in button, and again it moved the highlight to the next row. Now, there's also over here an explore button. So you can click this explore button and you can go ahead and indicate any element on the page. Like let's say I want to indicate orders and purchases. And you can see that it has copied the selector required to identify that element over here. And I can go ahead and copy it and maybe use it in my test since I have it in the clipboard. Okay? So this is a very useful way of identifying elements in your page. Let's say that you've developed your test to a certain point and right now you need to add some more elements. You can use the explore functionality and copy the selectors for those elements. Now, there is actually a different way of invoking the Playwright inspector. I'm going to close this right now. I'm going to stop my test. I'm going to set the pwdebug variable to 0. So going to the environment variables, I'm going to set it to 0 because I don't want the inspector to start automatically. And I'm going to show you the other way you can invoke it. I'm going to navigate to the sign-in method, and let's say I want to stop my test right before we perform this email fill action. What I can do, I can invoke the sign-in page and use a method called pause. What this will do, it will stop my test in this point, and it will open the Playwright inspector right here. So I'm going to run this test, not debug it, and it will stop at that pause action. Let's see how this works. Okay, it's going to click sign in, and then it stopped right here at my sign-in page.pause action. So here you can again play with the Explorer, you can step over it, and so on. Okay guys, this was all for this lesson.